Good morning, good afternoon, and good night to all. Wherever you are, I hope you are well. Welcome to the 8th edition of CR3, International Conference in Corporate Responsibility, Sustainability, Governance, and Innovation. My name is Gustavo Loyola, and I'm coordinator of the organizing committee of the conference here in Brazil. And it's a pleasure to receive you all here today at ISAE, even virtually. Since we announced this conference at La Trobe back in Melbourne 2 years ago, we started to design all this program for you. CR3 Plus is a collaborative initiative of 4 prime champion institutions: Audencia Business School in France, Hanken School of Economics from Finland, La Trobe Business School in Australia, and we, ISAE, here in Brazil. These champions have been working together since 2008 with the aim to exchange ideas, pedagogical process, curriculum, and research in the area of corporate responsibility. This year, the theme of the conference is Innovating, Shaping a Sustainable Future. And we hope that these 2 days will be very dynamic and full of new knowledge. Innovation has been accelerating the pace of changes towards sustainability and fostering new models, behaviors, and trends. It's one of the most promising drivers for addressing the societal challenge of our planet, especially now in the face of coronavirus pandemic. It recognizes the critical role of business in developing solutions, but also the importance of partnering, as innovation often happens through collaboration. So, to start our program today, I would like to invite Mr. Rafael Greca, Mayor of the city of Curitiba, to address some welcome words.
Eu sou prefeito de Curitiba. Meu nome é Rafael Greca, sou engenheiro urbanista e recebo com grande alegria a realização do Congresso CR3+, apoiado pela Organização das Nações Unidas. Felicito os organizadores, o ISAE do Brasil, a La Trobe Business School da Austrália, a Hanken School of Economics da Finlândia e a Audencia Business School da França. Curitiba é uma cidade educadora e é uma cidade voltada para a inovação. E nós, que somos a mais verde das cidades do Brasil, somamos dentro dos princípios do C40, no sentido de nos empenharmos contra o aquecimento global. A ideia de um congresso de educação voltado para a sustentabilidade faz bem ao meu coração de prefeito. Viva o Congresso CR3+.
Thank you, Mayor. Such an honor to have you supporting our initiative since the beginning. I also thank our other supporters, such as Prime, the Brazilian Network of Global Compact, ANAMBA, National Association of MBAs, and ANGRAD, National Association of Administration Courses. Thank you very much. Next, follow our opening session. Please welcome Dr. Norman Arruda de Paula Filho, President of ISAE and Prime Global Board member.
Welcome, everyone. On behalf of ISAE Business School, it's a great pleasure to host the 8th CR3 Plus conference. To take this opportunity to thank the partnership with Audencia Business School in France, Hanken School of Economics in Finland, and La Trobe Business School in Australia, who have been with us since the beginning of this journey that started nearly 10 years ago. I also wanted to thank Professor Metzi Mersing, head of Prime, for her continuous support. Mr. Jonas Hertel, Chief of Executive Director, United Nations UNITAR, the Mayor of Curitiba, our friend, Rafael Greca de Macedo, and Eduardo Pimentel, Curitiba's Vice Mayor. Professor Antônio Freitas, Provost of FGV. The coordination of the event led by Professor Gustavo Loyola and his team from ISAE. And finally, thank you all dear reviewers, speakers, entrepreneurs, ex-students, and participants from joining us. In this edition, more than 30 papers will be presented, highlighting the mindset and academic urge to discuss how the innovation can help to implement the Sustainable Development Goals in this time of pandemic, which has been happening for much longer than we all expected. This situation has brought devastating consequences never imagined to all layers of the society, delaying the global agenda. Therefore, the debate we now encourage is vital. Throughout its 25 years of existence, ISAE Brazil has been working very hard to help building a more sustainable world, and this has only been possible thanks to the partnerships we have with the funding schools of CR3 Plus and the prime signatories. Panelists, professors, students, and all academic community, you are the excellence of this event. I truly hope that you will be inspired by our commitment with a sustainable future. Enjoy what we have carefully prepared. So, thank you so much.
As always, such inspiring words. Thank you, Professor Norman. For me, it's always a pleasure and inspiration to work with you in all the amazing and life-changing initiatives that ISAE carry on. So everyone, now following our agenda, you can stay at this room to hear our first keynote speaker, Paul Polman. Paul Polman works to accelerate action by business to tackle climate change and inequality, a leading proponent that business should be a force for good. Paul has been described by Financial Times as a standout CEO of the past decade. As CEO of Unilever, he demonstrated that a long-term multi-stakeholder model goes hand in hand with excellent financial performance. Paul was a member of UN Secretary-General high-level panel which developed the Sustainable Development Goals, and which he continues to champion, working with global organizations and across industry to push the 2030 development agenda. I would like to invite you guys to check Paul's new book, Net Positive, that is now available. It's a call to arms to encourage business leaders, setting out how to build net positive companies with profit by fixing the world problems rather than creating them. He also chairs Imagine Said Business School and he's vice chair of UN Global Compact, as well as B team member. Paul is a honorary chair of the International Chamber of Commerce, which he leads for 2 years. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Paul Polman for the session, Building a New Mindset for a Sustainable Future.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm very honored to speak to you today. Management education is the route to leadership development and galvanizer of change in companies. So business schools and universities like yours have an enormous contribution to make in advancing corporate responsibility and sustainability. That's why I'm proud to also be a board member of PRIME, the Principles for Responsible Management Education. As PRIME champion, it is actually wonderful to see your schools collaborating to exchange ideas, curriculum, research, innovations, and more that will help advance the Sustainable Development Goals in management education and generate the leaders needed to navigate this increasingly choppy water. For instance, I'm happy to see that you have this conference now in its 8th year, bringing together students, researchers, and teachers from 4 different countries. That's a major accomplishment. I'm also pleased to see that you've created an easily accessible online course, which already has taught over 5,500 students to date about the Sustainable Development Goals and business's role in achieving them alongside governments and civil society. Indeed, the SDGs need business, but business needs as much the SDGs. We need more of these multicultural and multidisciplinary partnerships from academia to develop the leaders that our world needs to tackle humanity's biggest challenges. This is the decade of action, as we all know, and we need the best of all. I've always believed that business should serve people and planet, and that the SDGs cannot be achieved without the help of business driving innovation at scale. I also think that it's probably the biggest business opportunity that we have in front of us, and not surprisingly, more and more are moving, seeing it increasingly not as a cost but as an investment needed to prosper long term. As COVID has clearly shown, we cannot have healthy people on an unhealthy planet. And it has also pointed out the interdependency of our Earth systems, biodiversity, human health, climate change, inequality, economy, and yes, racial dimensions, all interrelated. Above all, COVID has shown that the cost of inaction is now bigger than the cost of action. Combined in Europe and the US mainly, the governments have already spent $17 trillion to save lives and livelihoods, and the IMF estimates that our global economy this decade has lost well over $27 trillion. So I'm particularly excited to speak with a group who fully embraces this opportunity. Even our best efforts that we're putting in today, unfortunately, aren't adding up. The truth is that the challenges are bigger than we thought and have crept up faster. Perhaps we've been in denial too long. We now have more to do in less time. Everyone needs to step up a gear, especially business. Humans in the history of mankind seem to always overestimate the time we have before the issues become bigger. But the good news is that we also underestimate the speed with which technology moves. The 2 biggest challenges that we are facing now are undoubtedly climate change and inequality, and frankly, they are closely related. The IPCC report shows that human beings, unfortunately, are driving the climate change, and without radical action by 2040, when my grandchildren and maybe some of your children are at university, temperatures will rise well above 1.5 degrees to 2.7 degrees or more if we don't take action. And that, of course, will have devastating effects. We can't deny the science. The impacts are already felt everywhere, and in many cases, we're already close to negative tipping points. From the many heat waves and fires battling the world, to the droughts and frosts killing crops, even here in Brazil, where you're now hosting these meetings. All are now linked to the fast change in climate. And public anxiety about climate change has never been higher. What we need to do between now and 2030 is key. Earth's Overshoot Day was this year July 29th. That is the day when we use up more resources than the world can replenish. In fact, every day after that, we're stealing from future generations. We can't keep pushing infinite growth on a finite planet, and you would agree with me that anything we can't do infinitely is by definition unsustainable. And yes, we're leaving too many people behind as well. An economic system where too many people are left behind or feel that they're excluded will ultimately rebel against itself. And this is what we're seeing. There's 4.3 billion people living on less than $5 a day still, 1.6 billion vulnerable workers, even more exposed during COVID, 600 million people suffering from hunger, and yes, 150 million people driven back in extreme poverty since COVID. COVID probably has set us back 10 to 15 years. The gap is now bigger. We indeed have to step up. Now, the wonderful plan to not leave anybody behind will need about $3 to $5 trillion a year, far less than the $16-17 trillion that COVID has cost us so far. It won't come from governments alone. If you reckon that governments' combined overseas development aid is about $160 billion a year, the answer, therefore, has to be that business has to step up and fill this void, using these billions to unlock the trillions. Celebrating and creating more companies that profit by fixing the world's problems, not by creating them. That's the goal. Ambitious? Absolutely. Momentum is building, though, within the private sector. I believe that a growing number of CEOs are waking up to the need to act on climate change and the widening inequality. And they see the huge opportunities by doing so. They've stepped up in ways unimaginable just a few years ago. We saw this during the Climate Week in New York, and we can expect more of it in Glasgow when we meet for the COP26. Our challenge, though, is we're just not moving fast enough. I just wrote a book about this topic. It's called Net Positive: Why Courageous Companies Thrive by Giving More Than They Take, which launched earlier this month because I believe that with enough courage and an accelerated transformation of the private sector is now well within reach, putting business, in fact, in greater service of society and environment is the only way that leads us to the solutions. Systems transformations are never easy, but it is possible when people give life to those systems, are also willing to change themselves, especially the leaders. This requires business to step up in 3 areas: courageous leadership, innovation, and partnership. Courage comes from the French word cœur, or heart. The net positive journey starts with looking at ourselves, our personal purpose, and our willingness to do the harder rights versus the easier wrongs. It's not easy, but for the sake of our shared future, our common humanity, and our planet, I believe it will be worth it. Successful companies understand that they are increasingly going to compete on trust, on responsibility, and on creating and maintaining deep relationships with all stakeholders. Business and leaders need to step up, especially as politics and multilateralism is under tremendous pressure. They understand that profit should not come from creating the world's problems, but from actually solving the world's problems. That's the only way to maintain the license to operate. With World Overshoot Day, July 29th, doing CSR, often associated with less bad, is simply not good enough anymore. Nor is being sustainable, which is neither good nor bad, sufficient. It requires us to start thinking reparative, restorative, regenerative, or what we call with our book, net positive. It takes courage to do the harder right versus the easier wrong. It takes courage to take responsibility for your total impact in the world, intended or not. It indeed takes courage to step up and set targets that you know are truly needed, even if you don't know quite how to achieve it. And yes, it takes courage to embrace these broader partnerships needed to get to the real breakthroughs. Now, bifurcation between the good and the bad are already happening. And the biggest rewards, I believe, will come to those who take the biggest leaps, like leaders in the energy transition, such as Ørsted, or leaders in mobility like Tesla, or the ones that move to alternative food and alternative proteins like Beyond Burger. we aren't talking about the biggest business opportunity ever. The SDGs, I believe, are our best business plan or roadmap that we have to get there. At a minimum, it could unlock $12 trillion between now and 2030, and more importantly, also create about 380 million more jobs at the time that we need it most. The book talks about creating a movement. A simple question to start with is that, would the world be better off because you're in it, yes or no? Now, what are those companies that show net positive behaviors? What are their characteristics? First, they take ownership of all impacts and consequences in the world, intended or not. They operate for the long-term benefit of business and society. They create positive return for all stakeholders. They drive shareholder value as a result, not as a goal. And furthermore, and finally, they partner to drive the broader systems changes that are needed. It will require undoubtedly innovation, but there's never been a better time to do this. Everything is being reinvented. We're seeing the change happening at the scale of the industrial revolution, but at the speed of the technological evolution. And that should offer enormous opportunities to the ones who seize them. Imagine what net positive companies could look like when they solve the world's biggest challenges, not contribute to them. Food and agriculture companies embracing regenerative agricultural practices, making the soil richer, protecting biodiversity, and sequestering millions of tons of carbon. Aluminum, cement, and steel manufacturers developing carbon-free products and taking actually carbon out of the air. Consumer goods companies increasing the human and planetary well-being with everything they sell. Or social media companies helping people find their truth and strengthen, not weaken, the democratic process. And finally, financial companies funding only the clean technologies that we need for tomorrow's world and serving the poor better than the rich, giving people a hand up and creating equal opportunities for all. These are the type of companies and behaviors that will generate and regenerate the world. If being green is about doing less damage and sustainability about reaching zero, then net positive is indeed about making things better. Does this all sound too perfect? Perhaps. There are practical trade-offs undoubtedly along the way, and you can't advance on every front at once. Whilst balancing multiple needs, the whole enterprise should move in this direction. It's a challenge, a journey, and a complicated dance, and you can't get there in one leap. No organization, including Unilever, is far enough along the journey, but a growing number of companies are embracing elements of this net positive business model. The opportunity here is profound and rewarding. It's a new way of thinking about creating business value. A company giving more than it takes will not focus on profit with a side hobby of philanthropy. Instead, it embraces purpose in the core of the business and creates value from values. This is a revolutionary way of thinking in modern business. Now, higher education, specifically business schools, will also be important partners in creating the net positive model for the future. In fact, we cannot achieve this without the professors, students, deans, and researchers all in the room. Business schools need to reimagine their purpose or role in a post-COVID world and become stewards of a more inclusive and equitable economy. And new leadership qualities are needed. Those with a strong sense of purpose and a realization that self-interest and common good go together. Those that have abilities to look beyond the immediate issues and be guided by the longer-term solutions to these challenges. Leaders that are able to work collaboratively to address complex problems, that are willing to engage and connect with the world around them. At a time when the world is withdrawing, it needs leaders able to build these bridges. Above all, we need leaders that are self-aware and authentic. In a world of skepticism and mistrust, this is the only way to truly engage and inspire to action those around you. Leaders who never lose their sense of humanity and humility, or who help to address the most human of needs in others, that have to have that dignity and respected. These are the qualities needed to thrive in business and ensure we leave this world in a better place than we found it. These are the leadership qualities that business schools should now be actively teaching. Business schools, like every sector, must move faster. Specifically, they need to put sustainability at the core of all they do, and not, as happens all too often, as a sideshow. They need to develop the robust courses on sustainability for every single degree, bachelor's, master's, and executive leadership throughout the world. This should be as fundamental to management education as Economics 101 is now. Every student should understand climate change, and net positive thinking should be a basic framework for any future leader. We should also teach a stakeholder-based approach to capitalism over the traditional shareholder-based approach. The dominant model has been that for the last 50 years, shareholder obsession, as I call it. But it's now proving to be a failed doctrine that destroys our natural environment, drives climate change, and increases inequality. So we need to co-design a curriculum and a research agenda that is multidimensional to tackle humanity's biggest challenges. Impact here that you will have with your activities will also be key. Partner with business and civil society, embracing this net positive mindset to practically show the students how sustainability fits in this broader picture. We need stronger feedback loops to align learning and skills needed for purpose-driven businesses. Corporates can do more to tap into business schools' research and expertise, I believe, and create stronger partnerships to leverage its amazing R&D. If business schools successfully manage this transition, they will also be far better at helping the leaders of tomorrow, developing the skills and expertise they need to make an even bigger impact. Finally, business schools need to help every student find their purpose, and I would argue passion. Unlock energy and commit in young people on how best to help them become the real change makers that the world needs. True innovation is always driven by rebels who force disruption. Now we need a profound shift in our views on leadership and management education for business to help lead the way, become the trusted partner it can be, and solve the worldly problems that matter. The future of capitalism, humanity, and the planet depend on it. Thanks for all that you are doing. Good luck with the meetings.